All right, I want to talk tonight about something interesting. It's a shtickle pilpul. It might be shtusim. Might be a little shtusim, but I think it's interesting. There's a Gemara in Baba Basra and Kuf Tesvav that says as follows: somebody who has some ill person, a sick person in their house, he should go to a chacham, a wise man, and the chacham presumably will be mavakish rachman for this chayla. Now there's a few interesting details in this Gemara that I think are worth analyzing that we'll discuss. Number one is, if I would ask you, who should you go to daven for a sick person? I believe you would tell me, go to the Ribnus's kever, go to tzaddik, right? You go to like a big tzaddik. What's a chacham's relevance to Yelech Etzel Chacham? Why are you going to a chacham to daven for a sick person? Go to a tzaddik, go to a chassid, go to something that signifies the person's kedusha. Why is his chacham relevant to the discussion? So put that aside. That's one ha'ara. Another nakud is like this. There's a machlekes Rishonim how to learn the Gemara. Some Rishonim, the Rishonim on the block, and others, like the Mukhi Yosef and etc., they learn that Yelech Etzel Chacham Vivak Shel Rachman means go to the Chacham, and the Chacham will daven for the sick person, which I think is the pashtus of the Gemara. Yelech Etzel Chacham Vivak Shel Rachman, the Chacham will daven for the sick person. But if you look in the Meiri, I want to read you the lashon of the Meiri. The Meiri says as follows. The Meiri has something interesting to say. The Meiri on that Gemara says like this. He says as follows. He says, a person should always believe that a proper tefillah, a good tefillah, is mevatel the gzeira. Someone who has some sort of pain or a sick person in his house, so one of the other tzaros, he should go to a chacham and learn from him learn from the chacham how to daven, and then daven, a good davening, and you'll be successful and you get results. So Meiri takes this Gemara and Imamish turns it on its ear. Instead of the pashtus of the Gemara, the chacham will daven for you, the Meiri turns this into, go to the chacham, get a quick training sesh in how to daven, then daven and you get results. Now, Ad Kedei Kach, the other Rishonim that learn the pshat of it, the Mukhi Yosef says, and this is a very important makar for brachas from rabbis and whatever, the Mukhi Yosef says, minig b'tzarfas, on that Gemara, he says, the minig in France is, shekol mi sheyesh lechayil b'tech beisai, anybody who has a sick person in his house, mevakish pnei arav, hatoifes yeshiva, he goes to the Rosh Yeshiva, sheyivarach haisei, to give him a bracha. So, interesting, the Mukhi Yosef over here is being Moisef Yinakudus. The Mukhi Yosef, first of all, understanding that the word chacham probably doesn't mean tzaddik, he says it means the Rosh Yeshiva, and he also says, the yivarach haisei, the chacham will give you a bracha, which the Gemara doesn't say. The Gemara says, v'akshach racham and tefillah. Mukhi Yosef changes it to a bracha. So I really want to discuss what is this machlekes, the call it the Mukhi Yosef school of thought and the Meiri school of thought in this Gemara. What's going on in this Gemara? Why are some Rishonim saying Yelech Etzel Chacham means the Chacham will daven for you, the Chacham will give you a bracha, something like that? And why are some Rishonim saying that it means to learn from the Chacham? So these are the two ha'aris that I think are interesting in this Gemara. Now let's open this up a little bit. So I happen to have seen a vart from Zalman brought down b'shem the Lublina Rav, Leo Kletzkin, that he said the reason why the Gemara says Yelech Etzel Chacham Vivak Shel Rachman is because you go to a guy, imagine a guy, a Chacham, a Talmid Chacham, a Tzaddik, a Rebbe, who has hordes of people at his door. Everyone's bringing their daughters and their sons and their this and that. They need brachas. Eventually, it's going to get to the guy's head. He said, I'm really a pretty special person. Like I get results from people. So Shem Zalman said b'shem Lublina Rav, Yelech Etzel Chacham means go to someone who's smart enough to know that when he gets results, it's not because of him. Hashem just took care of these people. Meaning Yelech Etzel Tzaddik, who's also a Chacham. So he knows not to take credit for the results. That's what the Leo Kletzkin said. But I think there's another aspect over here, another pshat that we can discuss, and that's as follows. There is a fascinating discussion that starts with a Ran. I want to show you a Gemara Nadarim, a very interesting Ran, and then we'll pivot back to where we're talking about over here. The Gemara Nadarim on Daf Mem says as follows. It says, Kiyasser Rav Dimi Amar. Rav Dimi said, anybody who visits the sick person, this is the mitzvah of Bikr Chaylim, he causes the person to live. And if you're not mevakar the chayla, you cause him to die. So my grandma, what's the grandma? Are you going to tell me that the pashtus is that someone who goes davens for the chayla to be cured, and someone who doesn't go is davening that the chayla should die? Were you davening the guy should die? If you don't go visit the sick, you're ambivalent. You don't know that the guy's suffering. You don't see his matzav playing out for real. You're a little bit ambivalent, and you don't daven properly. If you don't daven properly, he's going to die. That's what the Gemara says to Pshutei. Now, on this Gemara, there's a fascinating Ran. The Ran says like this. The Ran says, Ein mivak shel racham lo sheyichav l'shiyamas. Nira be'einai, the Ran says. The Hachika Amar, Pa'amim, there are times, shetzarach levakesh racham malachei l'shiyamas. There are times that you have to daven for a sick person that he should die. Read that one more time. Pa'amim.
I do that all the time.
Yeah, pa'amim, that's not good. Pa'amim, there are times.
We don't pass.
Yeah. 1 second, hang on. Pa'amim, there are times, shetzarach levakesh racham malachei l'shiyamas. You have to daven for a person that he should die. Kigoin, for example, shemitztayr hachila b'chol yom, if the chayla is very sick, harbe v'yefshel sheyichya. No, Pashit, the situation is dire. The guy's not going to live. Sometimes the guy's not going to live. What he has, we're not bulletproof. Sometimes the guy's just going to die. And if you go there and you see that this is over, it's really over, he's on his last leg, why are you davening to prolong it? Why are you davening for something else? Daven that he should die. That's what the Ran says. But there are times you have to daven that he should die. And the Ran brings a fascinating raya. Says the Ran, Kedamrin and Perak that the Gemara in Ksubis, in the end of Ksubis, tells us a famous story. Rabbeinu HaKadosh was very sick. He had major stomach ailments, probably some kind of, terminal stomach cancer, whatever Rebbe had. He was in tremendous, tremendous pain. And the Rabbanan were in yeshiva and they were davening that Rebbe should have a refuah shalem and he should have a richas yamim and he should dance at his ear eniklach chasanas. They were dancing. But he said, they were really doing, pulling out all the stops on the tefillah. So it says, Amsid be Rebbe. Rebbe's, the lady who worked in the house, who's just a regular civilian. She saw that Rebbe was suffering so much and she was davening the whole time that Rebbe should die. Rebbe should go already. But she saw that she wasn't able to win this tefillah tug of war. All the chacham were in the Beis Medrash davening, and she's davening for something else. So she went up to the roof, and she took some glassware. She threw it off the roof. It made like an explosive shattering sound. And in that instant, when everybody paused their tefillahs, she davened, please, take Rebbe, and Rebbe was nifter. And this is read that the chacham find out, and they say, not schar reilam samitzukim, and Rebbe's levaya is a whole story. And fine, that's the Gemara in Ksubas. Says the Ran, you see from that Gemara, that this woman understood. I want to read you something interesting that he says. He says, Kivan the Chazi Amsa the Rebbe, the Kama Zimnan, the all Kama Zimnan Lebeis HaKisei, V'anach Tefillin, V'kamet Tzar. She saw Rebbe was going to the bathroom, putting on tefillin, he was in pain. She understood that he was in a lot of pain. Amra, she said, Yehi Ratzon, she Kaifil El Yonim Esatachtoinim. Let the El Yonim, the Shemayim, was trying to take Rebbe up, be successful, vanquish the Tachtoinim. Kalemar, the Limas Rebbe should die. Misham Hachika Amar, the Mavaka Chaylam, Ma'ile B'tfilasei, because you'll know to daven, to not daven, what you want for this person. Now, the Ran, so this is the Ran's raya. Now B'kitzur, we have over here a Ran that's presenting a very fascinating concept. That sometimes you could analyze the guy's sickness, and you could say, this is not worth living for. He's too sick, it's time for him to die, and down for him to die. Now the question is, and Ezra pointed this out, do we paskin like this or not? So now, what's interesting is that the Shulchan Aruch, the Rambam, the Rif, etc., none of them bring this din. This interpretation that the Ran has in the Gemara, nobody brings. None of the place can bring. But, incidentally, the Aruch HaShulchan, and Hilchos Bikur Cholim, brings this din down lahalacha. The Aruch HaShulchan says that when you go visit a guy, see how sick he is, and if you look at the situation and it appears that this guy is too sick to have a refuah shalem and is really just suffering, it is advisable, not only permittable, is permitted, it's advisable to daven for the person that he should have an easy passing. As there's like the Aruch HaShulchan. So the Aruch HaShulchan seems to pass like this. Now, the Maisa, the Heintige Paiskim, Rav Moshe, Shlomo Zalman, Tzitz Eliezer, each one of them in different places in the Chuvas talk about this, and each one of them in different places do not pass like this. So I would safely say, short of the Aruch HaShulchan and the Rav Bar Tanura and the Ran, no one else seems to hold like this. It's not a day yichidah, but it's kind of a day yichidah. It's like an outlying feature. So now let's handle a little bit some of the kasha, some of the sugya part of it, and then we'll circle back. Now let's start with the first raya that the Ran brings. And Tzitz Eliezer makes this point. The first Ran, he says, let's analyze the story. You have this story with Rabbeinu HaKadosh. He's sick. He's in a lot of pain. The Chacham were all davening, his shifcha is davening, he should die. She has to intercede, she makes this, ruse, and she gets him to die. So comes along the Ran, and the Ran says, I look at this story, and I see, this is a concept of davening for someone to die. Says in Tzitz Eliezer, says, of course, I can't argue in a Ran misvara, he says, but, lula de mistafina, I would say, I don't understand. On one side of the scale, you have the whole mayatzis. All of Rebbe's Talmidim and Chaverim, Rosh Hashivas, Rabbanim, Tzadikim, whatever. The whole mayatzis is on one side, davening that Rebbe should live. And the other side, you have his maidservant, who was a good lady, I'm sure, right? She lived I'm sure she was a wonderful person, but you have every Talmud Chacham in Rebbe's yeshiva versus this thing. And you tell me that the takeaway from this Gemara is that Vaistais, what the Amsid Rebbe was doing, is davening Shaddai. Vaistais, that's the right thing. Now that's his taina on the Ran's Raya. Now, interesting taina, right? Meaning you have all the Chachmei Olam at that time are doing something different. She's doing this. So one could say, and he brings this sad, L'maisa, from the fact that she was Matzliach, you see there's a certain siyata d'shmaya to what she was doing. So you say, no, she nutztais a minute, she got through. So, but what I thought, and I think I saw someone say this, is something interesting like this, is that the Gemara retells us the story of Rebbe. There is no purpose of telling us the story. Every story Chazal tells us has a lesson, right? Chazal don't just say stories for the fun of it. They're not just recording what happened. So the Gemara is bringing down the story on purpose, and is bringing down this, monumental tug-of-war that was happening between Elyonim and Tachtainim, and where the Chachamim were, and what Amsei Rebbe was doing. And it tells us this outcome, how Amsei Rebbe was able to outfox them and get the result that she wanted. And ultimately, it almost sounds like the Gemara is setting it up for a lesson. And the lesson could potentially be that sometimes it's the right time to daven for the person to die. Almost as if to suggest that the Chachamim, and this is how the Ran and others interpret it and say, the Chachamim were in yeshiva. They didn't see how much Rebbe was suffering. They knew Rebbe was sick, so they were davening. What do you do when someone's sick? But Amsei Rebbe, who says observed Rebbe's actual illness, and she was in the house with him, she saw how sick she was, she understood that this was the time to go. And Chazal, by choosing to bring down this story and frame the Tut Stadim, and then show you how this side won, and etc., are trying to teach you this lesson. So it's interesting, Tzitz Eliezer has this whole discussion on the raya that the Ran's bringing, interesting Gemara. Now, additionally, there's another Gemara. There's Gemara in Rosh Hashanah that says something interesting. Gemara in Rosh Hashanah says that, I think it was Rav Chisda, it's Gemara in Tazayin. It says Rav Chisda went to visit someone who was sick, and he saw that this person was mamish not doing well, and he told the family, I just want to get the name right, he told the family, prepare tachrichim. That's what he said, prepare tachrichim. Now, the din in Shulchan Aruch is, if you look in Hilchos Shchiv Mira and Hilchos Avelus, you're not allowed to prepare anything for a dead person before he dies. We don't do that. We only prepare for a dead person when he's dead. But I think it's Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda said, it's time to prepare for this person, he's not going to be around. It's a Gemara, it's Rosh Hashanah Yedzayin Amid Aleph, it's Rav Huna Breder Vishua Chalash, all Rav Papa L'Shula. Rav Papa's the one who did it. So Rav Papa comes in, Papa says, prepare tachrichim, he's not going to live. The Gemara says, Tzim Seif, what happens? He says, Tzivisul is Avdasa, prepare your tachrichim. L'Seif is Fatach, he got better. Have a michsev for Papa L'Mechsev. Rav Papa was embarrassed to see him. Because Rav Papa had gone in and basically signed his death certificate, told him, okay, it's not going to work for you, goodbye, we'll see you when Eilam Amas. And then he's back in Beis Medrash. So Rav Papa was hiding him, he was embarrassed to see him. As is like the Gemara. So, what did he say?
He gave him the courage.
He gave him the courage to fight. So he says this. So the Netziv is in the Hemek Shail, in the Shiltas, the Netziv wants to bring this right. Says the Netziv, you see from Rav Papa's Anhaga that Rav Papa came in, he saw someone who was terminal, he saw something that had no hope, and Rav Papa Paskin, Rav Papa said, it's not happening, Masich L'Shalom, you should have a safe travels to Eilam Amas. He says, so that's the Shiltas is, the Netziv's Raya. Says the Tzitz Eliezer again, and I think this is very valid. He says, you see, again, the Gemara is framing it again. This is the opposite. The Gemara is bringing Rav Papa being embarrassed. Clearly, the Gemara is trying to give a veiled rebuke on Rav Papa's Anhaga. The Gemara is trying to say that's not an appropriate Anhaga. Look how it turned out. Ultimately, you don't really know if a person's going to die, even though you paskin in your mind this person's going to die. But still, you don't have this Anhaga. Now, the shaila would be Bisman Hazeh, where we have much better medical knowledge, right? Today, I know this is not popular in from circles, but today doctors a lot of times actually know what they're talking about, right? And so of course, not always, and of course, I saw something funny. The Rav Shmuel Rozovsky was very, very sick. He had cancer in the 70s. He came to Boston. He was in Boston for a while, getting treatments, and he was very down. Those who were around at the time, he was very down. He didn't want to talk. He didn't want to schmooze. He said I'm ready to go. Like this is not. So someone around him asked him. He said, Chazal Zagin from Chizkiyo Amelech. The Gemara in Brachos tells us, "Afilu cherev chadam menachas al shavar shaladam." Even if a sharp knife is on a person's neck, al yim natzim min arachamim. You're not supposed to give it from getting rachmanis. And that's like how every yid looks at terrible tzaras. That there's a way we're going to krich out of it. We're going to get out of it. So Rosh Rozovsky, ever the Lamdan, he said. That's if the blade's not cutting into the flesh yet. If the blade's already cutting into the skin, it says munachas al tzavare, not cutting into the skin. This is Rosh Rozovsky's chilik. So mitzad echad, the medical world is advanced, and if they say someone's going to die or something's incurable, generally speaking, it is incurable, and that's how it's going to be. Mitzad sheni, from a spiritual perspective, from a ruchnistic perspective, we're much less connected and much more distant. So the real need then is, how do you analyze this shaila? This shaila of doing this ran in action, meaning this ran, to treat this Ran as an actual halacha and say there's time to die for a guy to die, time to daven for a guy to die, is that a medical decision? Meaning you walk in, you see this illness is mamish, terrible, so medically there's nothing to do, daven for him to die. Or is the pshat, it's a ruchniistic decision. You walk in, and with the Papa's vision or someone else's deep spiritual intuition, they can walk in and they can say this person's tafkid is completed. This person's job over here is completed. This person's need to be here is completed. So go. So have a safe travel. Is this a ruchniistic decision or is this a medical decision? And the nafkamina would be bisman hazeh, when our medicine is all that much sharper and all that much clearer. Maybe you'd say it makes more sense if someone is in a terrible situation. So just say goodbye. Daven for them to die. But if you say it's a spiritual decision, who from us would feel comfortable to say, I analyze you and you're metukan, you're ready to go? Like who would even? So Rav Moshe, interestingly, in his tshuva about this, Rav Moshe writes this. And Rav Moshe says that the Ran says that you could daven this. He says this is only b'mei chachamim v'hanaviyim. This is someone who could come in and could assess the situation ruchniistically and paskin from a ruchniistic perspective that this is over.
The Amster Rav was a
so Vice Amster Rav was a great, like Tevi Avdi, Amster Rav. These were great to mention, hiding in plain clothes, But Rav Moshe says, I want to read it to you. Rav Moshe says this is a ruchniistic psak. A ruchniistic psak we're not capable of making bisman hazeh. He says, Rav Moshe says as follows. Where is it? Here. He says, "Ein tefillah zeh mutares rak b'makom sheyadanu layilu that tefillah slach yosei." A person who's spiritually in touch, who knows that tefillah can't help anymore. Meaning, he sees the whole system, how everything's set up. He says, "Tefillah is not going to work here anymore." V'yamim rishonim achin hayu bekiyim b'zeh. They knew this. Ulam anan dar yasam einu tanu navi v'leyadanu ad malish b'tim kalsa ha'ra'am lav. We never know when, what tefillah could, it can't. Shmuel's chilik is a chilik that's not machalik, says Rav Moshe. It's a spiritual question. It's a ruchnistic question, and no one today has the power, the potential to be able to see that perfectly clear and make that psak. So, and Rosh Zalman and Minchas Shleiman and Tzitz Eliezer, obviously, they all lean into this and say that bisman is that we don't have the ability to pass in such a shayla, such a shayla chamur like this round, and therefore we don't pass like this, even though the Aruch HaShulchan brings it. But the Velt Zicher doesn't nem on this pasture of davening for a person to die. So now let's circle back to the Gemara about Basar for a second. I have maybe it's Purim Torah, maybe it's not, a suggestion. The Gemara says, you have an ill person in your house, go to the Chacham and V'akshel V'rachman. Now according to Muki Yosef and the Rashbam and others, that means Kipshutah, the Chacham is going to daven for the Chayil B'tech Beisai, and he's going to get the result you need. Now why a Chacham? Maybe if you have a few minutes we'll circle back to that, but the Chacham is going to get results. Now the Meiri that I quoted in the beginning, the Meiri says you go to a Chacham because the Chacham will teach you how to do the right davening, and then you'll get a result. Now, and we also, the point that the Lublina Rav made, is that why is a Chacham? It should be tzaddik, it should be chassid. Why is it saying Yelech Etz Chacham? I think maybe you could suggest, in the Ran's world, the Yelech Etz Chacham is to go to get the ultimate psak. You have someone who's mamish, deathly ill, he's terribly ill, he's terribly sick, and you don't know, what do I do here? Do I daven that he should die? I daven he should live? What even is my tefillah supposed to be? Meaning, just to know how to daven simply, a regular Jew doesn't have to go to a chacham to learn that. Take it to Tehillim and daven. Everybody knows how to daven. According to the Meiri, potentially, you're going to the chacham because there's the ultimate question. There's like the question that only a real chacham could paskin. Only a real chacham who knows exactly where everything stands, where this guy's up to, where the tefillah is up to, where only a real chacham could assess this shayla and make a psak. Now, I don't know if this is actually pshat in the Meiri's pshat in the Gemara Basar, but I'm suggesting that in the Ran's world, you could say such a vart. The Yelech Etz Chacham means to get this shayla paskin. Now, I see we have a few minutes left. Let's just talk about this inyan of Yelech Etz Chacham b'chlal. What is this thing, go to a chacham to daven? So in Halicha Shleima, in the part about Rifa'enu, there's a great little write-up about Rosh Zalman's pasture in regards to davening for sick people, and I think it's it's insightful on the whole of what's going on here. I'll start with this. I saw in a new sefer that came out in Chumash Hadiri Atayra. I saw he brought down. You saw it?
I like the name.
Oh yeah. It's a good name. The sefer is good too. He brought down in there something interesting. He said Rabbi Ber, as a young kid, Rabbi Ber was for Shabbos in Lakewood sometimes with Reb Nassim. He said Reb Aaron would get an aliyah every Shabbos. He would go up, he would get an aliyah, and when he was done his aliyah, he would make the Mishaberach L'Chilin by himself. Reb Aaron would go right away and say Mishaberach L'Chilin. He's not saying. He said the shtick amongst the kids who were there would be to count how many names Reb Aaron could say without reading from a paper. Meaning how many Chilim could he remember from memory on his own. He said the most Reb Aaron ever did was 84 Chilim. Remember the 84 Chaylim in a row without a name. Now, Rav Aaron, so the takeaway of the story, obviously, whoa, what a genius, right? Rav Aaron was a crazy genius. But we don't need 84 Chaylim to prove that Rav Aaron was a genius. Take a mission of Rav Aaron, you'll see that right away. That's not the Rav Aaron's. I think there's another Nakuda in the story that's wichtig to take out of, is you cannot remember 82 names if you don't care about these people. That's the Metzias. You're not going to remember 82 name combinations and spit it out if each individual doesn't actually mean something to you. Meaning, the Yelech Etzel Chacham and the potency of a Chacham's Tefillah is the fact that the Chacham makes it his business and his problem. The Medrash says, Yelech Etzel Chacham, so that the Chacham becomes included in the problem, and then once the Chacham is included in the problem and you're included in the problem, shouldn't the Chacham be the one to daven? He's more powerful than you. So if you both have a problem, meaning if you're a shutef with Rav Chaim Kanievsky and something's going wrong, so you have the good fortune that Rav Chaim Kanievsky is a shutef, he's going to daven for you. So Yelech Etzel Chacham is to be mishtatef the Chacham in your shutfus, that he should be part of it. So along this vein, Rav Shlomo Zalman used to say, and maybe this is tongue in cheek, Rav Shlomo Zalman came from Chassidim, so he's allowed to say this. Rav Shlomo Zalman, his great grandfather was a rebbe in Chernovitz. He could have been a rebbe if he wanted. So he's allowed to say this. Rav Zalman said that, but the Chassidim, the minig is, when you come to a rebbe to daven for you, you give him a kvittel, and there's money. There's always money changing hands. He says, what's the pshat? He says, because when I pay you to daven, now it's personal. Now you got to get results. You already took my money. Now it's personal. He says, so the Chassidim figured out a way that Tefillah became personal for the Rebbe, so that the Yelech Etzel Chacham Vivakshel Racham. So the Chachma is to make it personal. This is Rav Shlomo Zalman says this. This is not Rav Shlomo Zalman says it. That the Yelech Etzel. So he says, but by Ons, he says, by Ons Litfakers, who we don't get paid to daven for a chayil. So a guy comes in, he tells me, if I don't spend 5 minutes, Rav Shlomo Zalman was very makbid when someone comes, he said, I need to spend 5 minutes with you, tell me a little bit about your life, tell me what's happening with you, tell me where you stand, because I don't know you, and I don't get to know you, then I'm not invested. If I'm not invested, I'm not getting it. There's no results that I'm going to get. Rav Shlomo Zalman used to say also, when he davens for a chayil, he doesn't daven for them every tefillah. Every tefillah just becomes row. And I write them down on paper, say it every tefillah. I have to daven because I care about you. So by mincha I daven for these 8 people, and by musaf, by shachas daven for these 8 people, because it has to be personal. It has to be, becomes part of my order. Like Rav Shlomo Zalman over here, they say people would come to him to daven for something, and then they'd come back a year later, and they, machzach nishvissendik, as if nothing happened. And they'd say, no, what's with whatever tzara he came? They say, oh yeah, it was resolved, already 6 weeks ago. And Rav Shlomo Zalman, who was an extremely mild-mannered person, would get upset at them. So I don't understand. You come here, you tell me, I made this part of my. I care about this now, and you don't update me when something's going right. Like what type of thing is that? So this is like the same. All this idea of empathy. So an important part of the Yelech Etzel Chacham V'Yakshel Rachamim is that you're going to a real serious person, a Chacham, a tzaddik, whatever, who has the plates and the hearts to make other people's tzaras his personal tzaras, and that's how he gets results. It's not just his chachmashaf. It's not just that he's an adam gadol. It's also that he's nice about taka in a real way, meaning he's a person who brings it onto himself and becomes part of him. There's a medrash in 2 weeks ago's parsha where by Miriam when she got saras, right? So that's the original makar, right? The Gemara, the pasuk says Moshe Rabbeinu finds out that Miriam has saras, and Moshe Rabbeinu says Kelna Rafan Allah. The original story of going to a chacham to get the tefillah, to get her refuah shalema is Moshe Rabbeinu, who gets the result, and Miriam gets healed, right? And from there, the Gemara in Brachas, on Daf Lamed, something, says that in the presence of the chayil, you don't have to say the chayil's name. Meaning, we learn from their dinim in regards to Hilchas Tefillah. Presence of the chayil, you don't say the name, because Moshe Rabbeinu, he just said, Kelna Rafan Allah. Now, in certain Chassidish Svarim, the Degel and Rav Nachman, they say there's Ramazim and Kelna Rafan Allah to her name, but Kipshuta, Ein Mikri Yitzim, Kipshuta, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't say her name, he was able to daven for her. Now, the Medrash describes it, the Medrash says, Moshe Rabbeinu, when Miriam came, he says, Ag Uga, he made a circle on the ground, which is reminiscent of Cheni Amagel, the famous story with rain. He says, Ag Uga, he made a circle on the ground, and he said, I'm not leaving from here until I get the result. And then he said, Kelna Rafan Allah. So, what's the chat on that? What's this like dramatic effect? Like Ag Uga, Moshe Rabbeinu's tefillah is going to be rising himlin no matter what, right? Moshe Rabbeinu is pal daber by like Mara, like Bechidus, there's never like Moshe Rabbeinu's Ag Uga. So I saw explained, and this is something you see repeated. Some of the Nevi'im did it, and Chani Amagel did it. Is Ag Uga means it's personal. Moshe Rabbeinu said, "I got skin in the game now. I'm not leaving this circle until I get the result I need." That's the built into the original Tfilas Chacham on a Chayla, the Yelech Etzel Chacham V'Yakshel Rachamim, is the fact that the Chacham makes it personal. Moshe Rabbeinu did that with the Medrash. The Medrash is explaining Moshe Rabbeinu in the first field that a Chacham ever davened for a Chayla. Moshe Rabbeinu made it personal, and that's taka how it always is. Okay, this is some maybe Purim Torah, maybe not Purim Torah on the sugi of Yelech Etzel Chacham V'Yakshel Rachamim.
You've You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.